Hey everyone, it is Dani'i and welcome to this update video. I hope that you guys are having a marvelous Monday thus far. And so of course in this video, I'll be taking you guys through quite a bit. Firstly, of course, we have some activity across some areas that is enhancing the flood threat. Next, of course, there's that Saharan Dust making its way further into the Caribbean. Could we possibly see development in the Caribbean based on what GFS is showing? It is being very consistent about it. But also, could we start to see these waves coming in from the tropical Atlantic, getting themselves together and becoming risks to the Eastern Caribbean? So the Eastern Caribbean might be in for some increased rainfall down the line. And so before I go into details with all of this, please do subscribe if you haven't yet done so and tap the notification bell so that you never miss an important update. Alright, so of course we return to this infrared satellite imagery of the North Atlantic. And so we can see here that there is quite a bit of activity along the intertropical convergence zone. We also have a couple of waves, but notice that the activity is increasing compared to, let's say, a couple of days ago. So it's also resulting in all that increased rainfall for some areas such as parts of Northern South America and Trinidad, maybe eventually for Tobago as well, and then other areas such as Grenada. But for now, Trinidad and Tobago, and we're seeing that this is also extended into parts of Guyana and Venezuela. So let's take a closer look at the area here, as we can see that there's lots of this convective activity resulting in lots of heavy rainfall, flooding. So if you're in Trinidad, you can let me know what's happening there. And please, guys, remember to stay safe, because the thing is, this is likely going to be remaining persistent within the area for some time. And if it is going to be doing so, the soil is going to be saturated because of all of that continuous rainfall activity, which will eventually lead to flooding for areas that have not yet begun experiencing inundation. So please stay safe, guys. But going to the general Caribbean region here, we can see that things are looking pretty much dry in the east. Some clouds coming over from the tropical Atlantic, maybe bringing some overcast conditions or an isolated shower to sections of the eastern islands. But for the most part, we have that Saharan dust there, so it's going to be very hazy today for these different areas, also including Jamaica. So we're going to be taking a look at the Saharan air layer map very shortly. But down in the southern Caribbean, though, we see shower and thunderstorm activity developing, lots of moisture within that area, and that is where the GFS has been consistent for over a week now in terms of seeing something develop from that area and make its way up to the north. And I also want to point out that the Euro is also expecting something interesting, so we'll be looking at those models very soon. But heading to the northwestern Caribbean now, things are looking pretty dry in the vicinity of the Yucatan, going to Belize. Similar story for most of the other Central American territories, inclusive of the Bay Islands of Honduras. And then of course for the Cayman Islands, things are looking to be in the clear. For Cuba, Central Cuba specifically, we see lots of shower and thunderstorm activity, also in parts of the Bahamas as a result of what is left behind from all that activity that took place a couple of days ago. And so now in terms of the rainfall expected as we're going to be heading throughout today, so starting out with the GFS model, we can see here that as the map becomes more colorful, a lot more rainfall is expected. And look in the vicinity of Trinidad. So through today, lots of rainfall activity. That risk of flooding is definitely there, guys. So again, I reiterate, please do not take any unnecessary risks, and please stay as safe as you can. Some substantial rainfall is also likely across most of northern South America, parts of Colombia, going to Venezuela, and especially the northern sections of Guyana, Suriname, and French Guiana. Things looking to be pretty dry in the ABC Islands. Maybe some brief shower activity at times within sections of the Eastern Caribbean, but more of that substantial rainfall expected for parts of Central America, especially as we head to the afternoon hours when we see most of that convective activity developing. And then, of course, heading to the northwestern Caribbean, we see some activity expected for the Yucatan, a bit more for Cuba, and of course in the vicinity of southern Florida and the northern Bahamas. So that is what is expected. Not too much anticipated for Jamaica through today. But going on to the Euro, the model is pretty much in agreement with this. Lots of rainfall down in the southeast and for northern South America, as well as for sections of the western Caribbean. But for most areas, Jamaica going to Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, coming down to the Lesser Antilles, not a whole lot of rainfall activity is anticipated. And so, guys, now we want to go ahead and take a look at that Saharan dust map. So here we have it. And of course, as we see more of those shades of oranges go into that red shade. That is where we have more abundant dust. And so all this dust and dry air really helps to inhibit that convective activity from developing a lot of that convection. But notice how the Saharan dust is extended into, of course, the Lesser Antilles, going to Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, even reaching parts of Hispaniola, Jamaica, and the eastern tip of Cuba, the Turks and Caicos Islands. So we see that this mass of dust is headed further in, and this is going to pose a problem for the system that the GFS is forecasting to develop, because if there is a very dry environment, if there's too much of this dust here, once it infiltrates all of that expected activity, then we're not going to be seeing too much become of this. It's going to be struggling a lot, coupled with if the wind shear decides to kick up in the area, because it is kind of conducive right now. But also for those waves, for all that activity along the intertropical convergence zone, notice how a lot of it is kind of south of that Saharan dust, most of that dust here. So as those waves move off Africa, and once they're going to be remaining in a favorable environment with that wind shear also being conducive, we can start to see development. And that is exactly what one of the models is showing, and I'll be taking you guys to it very shortly. All right, so now let's go ahead and we're going to be taking a look at the ocean temperatures. And so across the North Atlantic, this is the anomaly map. So these shades of oranges go into those reds. That indicates that the sea surface temperatures are above normal. White means neutral, and blues, as we head to those darker blues, the temperature is below normal. So we see that for most of where we have development, the tropical Atlantic going to the Caribbean and the Gulf, things are looking very warm and above average. And as a matter of fact, there has been some record warming taking place. So this is the kind of warming we would see heading to the peak of the hurricane season. But here we are in June, almost the middle of the month, and we are seeing all of this warming taking place. And if we look at the actual temperature map right now, note that tropical cyclones need at least 26 degrees Celsius to develop and intensify. And here we see that for many areas, it is more than 26, 30, 29, 27, 28 degrees Celsius coming from the coast of Africa and heading westward. So let's go ahead and now take a look at what the different models have to show in terms of that potential development. And we're starting out with the ICON model. So ICON is showing something very interesting as we're going to be heading into this week. And firstly, as of 2 a.m. this morning, nothing new has been marked on the National Hurricane Center's outlook. So please keep that in mind. And please keep in mind also that these are all model runs. These are all forecasts, which means there are bound to be inaccuracies. However, let us see what is common among them. So we're taking a look at the icon first. And so, of course, we are looking for those black lines. They're called isobars, and they join areas of equal pressure. And so all those colors, those greens and yellows you see, that's really representing the precipitation rate, or really just a lot of moisture within the area. So let us see what icon has to show. And there we have the time up there. So as we head further into this week, the model expects a wave to make its way off the coast of Africa. But look at that, a low pressure area developing as we head to the latter part of this week. This is very interesting here because, as I said, most of that Saharan dust is north of the intertropical convergence zone, not really infiltrating too much. So once we have the wind shear not being too strong, and those waters are very warm, as I showed you guys, so that is already conducive. But once all other factors remain conducive, we could very well start to see development. And this is what we would see head into the month of July. But again, we have those above average temperatures pushing the activity for this hurricane season. So I wouldn't be surprised to actually see this happen. As for the Southern Caribbean, there we see all of that activity as we head to the latter part of the week. Go into the Euro, so we're focusing a bit more on the Western Atlantic for this run here. Go into the end of this week, there we have the model expecting all that activity within the vicinity of Central America, but not showing development. A possible reason for this could be the land interaction, because of course, once that low pressure area develops and it's over land, there is going to be disruptions in the circulation. So that is going to be an inhibiting factor, as well as that Saharan dust that I talked about. Once we have a lot of dust in the area, that is really just going to be helping to suppress that activity as it develops. But to notice that we start to see a lot more activity over in the Eastern Caribbean. So as we head to next week, there we're seeing lots of activity being induced. So this could could be a cool down or some sort of a relief for you guys in terms of all of the dryness and the heat that has been plaguing the area. And then finally, we go on to GFS. So as we head to the end of this week, the model is still very consistent about that system developing, showing all of that activity, some even spilling over into the Eastern Pacific and forming a storm there that eventually makes its way into southern Mexico. And I think that this isn't impossible, but I would say there's a very low probability as of right now. So lots of rainfall expected for Central America, and there the model is showing that system developing, making its way to the Cayman Islands near Jamaica and to Cuba. So I would really say to take this with a grain of salt, because yes, the model has been consistent about something developing in the southwestern Caribbean, but it changes track every time. The moment it starts to move northward, we see sometimes it's going over to the Yucatan, going straight into the Gulf, making its way to one of the Gulf Coast states of the U.S. And now here we have it showing that, hey, we're going to be having this system making its way over into the Northern Islands. And so I'm sure that coming to the next run, the 6Z run here, we're going to be seeing something very much different. But another thing that the Euro is in agreement with is the fact that we'll see all of that rainfall increase across sections of the Eastern Caribbean as we head maybe into next week, sometime next week or the following week. So as more of those waves come by and conditions become more conducive, we're going to be seeing more and more development taking place. And so guys, of course, I'm going to keep you updated. So this video was quite a mouthful, but the takeaway from this is that firstly, we have all of that rainfall increase down in the southeast in the vicinity of Trinidad and Venezuela. So please take all necessary precautions. And we have these different models here expecting that, hey, we could possibly see something coming from the tropical Atlantic, and the GFS still being robust about that Caribbean storm here. So of course, I'll keep you guys updated. Not quite sure if I'll post an evening update, but I will keep you updated once it is necessary. And so that is pretty much it for this update, and I hope that you found it to be very informative. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try to respond as best and as soon as I can. And of course, remember to always be weather wise.